Artificial intelligence is remaking marketing as we speak, and if you're a marketer, you can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really, it's a no-brainer. Join Jeff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they explore the latest AI news, trends, tools, and ideas that are creating the future of marketing today. This is No Brainer, an AI podcast for marketers. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, yes, I am an AI. Take it away, Jeff and Greg.
Hey, this is Greg Verdino. Welcome to No Brainer. I am here with Jeff Livingston. Hello, Jeff. How are you today?
What's up, Greg? How are you?
I am doing well, and we have a guest this week. We're really excited about this episode. With us today is Paul Chaney. If you don't know Paul, he is a veteran digital marketer with deep expertise in content marketing in particular. But the reason he's with us today has nothing to do with content marketing, at least not directly. It has to do with marketing AI ethics. Paul is the publisher, the editor of the AI Marketing Ethics Digest, which, if you're interested, we will drop this note in the show notes as well, of course, is available at aimarketingethics.substack.com. And it's really grown over time to be one of the, in my opinion at least, one of the best sources for opinions and information, interviews, guidance around the intersection between AI ethics and marketing, which, as Jeff knows, as anybody who listens to this show knows, that is a keen area of interest for me, to the point where sometimes Jeff will roll his eyes that maybe I think about the ethical issues a bit too much, and maybe marketers don't, right? But that's something that we're going to certainly talk about today. So thank you for joining us, Paul. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that has grown on me. I started to say gradually, but it's really kind of overtaken my thoughts more and more these days. And I see the importance of it. And I also see sort of the lack of emphasis on it on the part of marketers. And maybe we'll get into all that. I don't want to get too preachy or anything, but I think there's a need to talk about this topic. So thank you for the opportunity.
For sure. Let's dive right in, my brother. Let's preach.
Well, I remember. Yeah. So, I remember when you first launched your newsletter, and I think I was a bit skeptical. I will say it's been really, and I think I expressed that to you, and you're like, no, it's going to be big. And you followed that dream, and it's really cool that you made it through, because you know what? I was wrong, man. I'm here to own that. I was dead wrong. That it is a massive issue, and it's one that's just kind of a barrier that we all need to work through. But I think maybe to start us off, we need a baseline, right? And so with that in mind, how do you define AI ethics for somebody that may not really think about ethics as part of their daily workflow? And what makes you really want to focus on marketing AI ethics? Is that because of your background? Can you explain kind of the genesis of this?
Yes, sure. Well, let's start with the definition. And when I was thinking about that particular question, I went and looked. Of course, I looked at, I asked all the LLMs I use and stuff. And pretty much the definitions that kept coming from various sources were all of just about the same. So, it's almost like a dictionary definition. It refers to the responsible, ethical development and use of AI technologies. That's it in a nutshell. But I think when you expand on that, you're thinking about what's the impact that it has on people? What's the impact that it has on society? How about even the environment, for Pete's sake, And when we think about AI and ethics together, that's not an oxymoron by any stretch of the imagination. We have to think about things like human rights. We have to think about how AI can do harm, but ethically we want to avoid harm. We want to align with human values. Now, therein lies the problem, guys. We don't always align on values. Cultures are different, nationalities are different, backgrounds are different. So how do you define what is a common set of values? I kind of came down to three words that seem to be somewhat universal. I can't say it exclusively. The word fairness, We don't want AI systems to discriminate. We don't want there to be arbitrary or algorithmic bias. We want there to be transparency. I mean, you look at AI. I think maybe before the recording you mentioned something about the Wizard of Oz. We look at AI like it's the great and mighty wizard. And yet, what's going on behind the curtain? We don't really know what's going on behind the curtain. So there needs to be more transparency, accountability. When AI screws up, who gets the blame? There has to be accountability. So fairness, transparency, accountability. Now, you ask about the marketing aspect of it. Let me just kind of go into my background for just a minute. I've been doing marketing since before Google. Yahoo was the big quote unquote search engine back in that day. And I got into this whole marketing thing thinking, there's something here. Maybe I can make a little money doing this. So 20
Paul,
some odd years later,
did you have a CompuServe address?
I did. I had Prodigy too, and AOL, and all of that.
3 for 3.
Really, man. I probably got a disc around here somewhere, a floppy disk that I could give you. I could mail to you.
My dad turned all of his CD-ROMs into coasters.
Well, so I've been doing this a long time, and most recently my focus has been on content marketing and B2B writing and editing and stuff like that. But when I got to looking and became so enamored, like maybe a lot of other people, with this whole AI thing, generative AI, and I realized AI has been around a whole lot longer than probably any of us realized. Maybe not you, but me. It just kind of came on the scene. It's like, ooh, what's this shiny new object? And I started playing with it, became enamored with it, and trying to learn how to utilize it for my own benefit. And then I saw, marketers jumping on the bandwagon with it. But here's what I saw. I saw a lot of talk about AI ethics, reasonably so. And I saw a lot of talk about, hey, how do we use this shiny new object for marketing? What I didn't see, however, was a discussion that was an intersection of the two. Let me not hide my face. How about that? And I felt like, there's room for discussion on. Yeah, there we go. Hear no evil.
And the show is all the better for that, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, in my case, that's true. I won't speak for you, but I don't like this space on
Where's
TV.
my box of tissues, man?
Yeah, I could wear a mask, but too bad COVID's kind of over. Well, sort of. But
knock on wood, brother.
Back to my point. If I'm making one, actually. It is this, that I felt like there was a need for a discussion on that topic. And I looked at newsletters, a lot of newsletters on how do you use these tools, newsletters about AI ethics, nothing about, other than one-off articles about the topic of AI ethics and its impact on marketing, or conversely, how marketers can use AI in an ethical fashion. Because let's face it, Seth Godin years ago had a book. It was a cult favorite called "All Marketers Are Liars." You may remember that book. I think he renamed it or something. It was really a book about being authentic and being true, but he was using kind of a kitschy little title. And so you think about marketing as being ethical. We want marketing to be ethical, irrespective of whether AI is involved or not, right? But there had to be a discussion. I didn't see anything going on. I said, what the heck? I'm just going to jump into the fray and try to stir the waters. And so that's kind of how that evolved. Yeah.
Well, quick follow-up question to that. Isn't that trying to teach a horse thief how to not be a thief?
Well, maybe so, but
I mean,
let me boil it down. Excuse me. Let me boil it down to this really ethics. You talk about a definition for AI ethics. It's this. AI ethics is human ethics. AI is a tool. That's what it is. Generative AI, ChatGPT, all of them, Claude, I love Claude, is a tool that we can use for good or for ill. I mean, we have a powerful, and I'm going to use this word euphemistically because I'm thinking about the movie Oppenheimer that walked away with all the Oscars and stuff. It's a powerful weapon in our hands that we can do with what we want. We can use it to cause harm, or we can use it to benefit people and society. But it comes back to us as human beings, how we're going to do things. And so AI ethics is human ethics. That's the bottom line. And marketers, I hope, will venture to be and aspire to be, ethical in everything they do.
So what, I guess, your excitement is palpable about this, right? And as I said earlier, Jeff knows, and sometimes I think almost gets aggravated with me because I tend to, when I first heard about ChatGPT and this whole generative AI thing broke, I didn't turn to like the Sam Altman's, the press releases, the BS. I immediately, for some reason, turned to like, what was Emily Bender saying about it, right? And that sucked me straight into the whole conversation on AI ethics and all of the responsible AI conversation and that stuff. But it seemed like I was the odd person out among marketers. And it seems like you may, in fact, be an odd person out among marketers in that you've put this so front and center to the way you're thinking about AI. So what are you finding when you talk to marketers about this? Are they thinking about this? Why aren't they thinking about it more? What are they not thinking about when it comes to ethics as it relates to AI?
Well, I want to speak to that both anecdotally and empirically, if you don't mind. So I'm a part, and maybe you guys are too, I'm not sure, of David Berkowitz has this thing called AI Marketers Guild. It's excellent.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Massive respect for David and everything he does. And he allowed me to be in charge of the Ethics in AI channel. And I'm going to tell you, I will drop questions in there periodically, and it's crickets. Nothing. There's been a couple, 3 people maybe, who've responded to questions, who seem to have some interest in it. The newsletter, I'm very proud of, and I'm not here to pimp the newsletter, okay? That's not what I'm about. I probably should, but that's not what I'm about. I'll let you guys do that. But I give Christina Martin, who the co-editor she was, she's moved on to other things now, great credit for writing good content. We've interviewed experts. Jeff, you were someone we interviewed. Greg, you're on the agenda. I'll just need to corner you about that. But we've talked to people in the know. We've done some good work there. You would think, man, this thing has probably got 1,000 subscribers. Well, no, it doesn't. We're growing gradually but slowly, and that tells me that this is not a priority among marketers. I mean, if this was a tools newsletter, I suspect it would be growing faster because that's what everybody's enamored with. Yeah. But that's just me anecdotally. But let me just share some statistics, if you would. I won't bore you to death with this, but Deloitte last year, they did a study of the workforce in Switzerland. They surveyed over 1,000 people. Now, okay, Switzerland, but hang with me. And here's what they discovered. In many businesses, management does not control AI implementation, and there are no clear guidelines for its use. Instead, get this, it is implemented by the employees themselves, and in 26% of the cases, a quarter of the cases, it occurs without their direct line manager even being aware of it. 61% of the people surveyed said that their company did not have any internal guidelines on the use of AI. Now, that's not specific to marketing, but it certainly includes marketing. Okay, well, that's Switzerland. What about the U.S.? Here's something that comes from several sources, so I can give you those sources if you want. Approximately 75% of business leaders in the United States agree that AI ethics is important. However, despite that recognition, only 6% of companies have policies in place for the responsible use of AI technology. So what does it come down to? It comes down to the fact that, yeah, it's important, but we're not doing anything about it yet because it's not a front burner issue. Now, maybe we'll get into talking about what needs to happen to make it front burner, but it's not.
I think that's kind of like where we want to go. I mean, to me, and I think part of my skepticism with this in the beginning with both of you was that I understand the importance of it. I definitely understand the importance of it from a crisis standpoint and what happens to a brand when they really mess this up. It's a bad scene. But this is something that most marketers are lazy, okay? Marketers will always take the fastest, easiest path to getting a job done. And part of that is because they have too many demands on them. They're getting sales off of them. Many people aren't formally trained as marketers. They aren't trained as ethicists or have a formal communications background. They don't have this kind of full liberal arts perspective, if you would, of what the philosophy and ethos behind human rights might be as they apply into a digital world. And then there's the whole digital divide capacity. There's a lot of complexity to this, and none of it has to do with keeping my job, particularly right now in the marketing space where it's been very difficult for the past year and a half to get a job, and senior jobs in particular. So if it's not my job, I'm not going to do it, I would say is the ethos of 90% of marketers. You know, how do we convince people to do that? Because my belief is that they'll just simply barrel on until it becomes a problem, and they'll address the problem when it hits them. And unfortunately, when it does hit them, it's probably going to be too much at that point.
Yeah. I mean, who was the comedian who said, it's not my job? You know, what was that? Freddie Prinze or Andy Kaufman, one of those. I get it. Look, I'm a marketer. I admit to being lazy. My wife will tell you I'm lazy, but you know, I get that. I am not here to besmirch or run down marketers in any respect, because that would be, you know, I'd have a finger pointing, but three pointing back at me, right? You know, Malcolm Gladwell, the book, The Tipping Point, you know, he said in that book, if I remember correctly, it's not going to be one big thing. It could be a coalescence of several things, right, that causes that tipping point. Well, I think there's 4 or 5 things. And I think one of those things is high profile incidents of unethical AI use. And we're seeing that. Let's go back a little bit, all the way to Cambridge Analytica. Now, you remember all that whole political thing, right? And Facebook and all that user data melee. Well, you know, I think use of AI in that sense was a little more nuanced, but there were things, data analysis, targeted ad testing, predictive modeling, all of that involved AI. We saw what happened with that. There was another controversy where a company, I think it was called Clearview AI, they created a large data set of images they scraped from the web for facial recognition purposes without people's consent. And they ended up getting sued because of that. I mean, we could go incident after incident after incident. Not necessarily related to marketing, but Amazon recruiting. They developed an AI-powered recruiting tool that showed some gender bias. So it's going to have more of that kind of thing happen. I think one of the things that will happen, it's already happening, is growing regulatory pressure. We're seeing that, I think, more in the EU, obviously, than we are seeing here. And but you know, it's coming. There's going to be AI specific laws. There's going to be industry standards. And you know, let me hearken you back to another thing that happened just a few years ago.
On that note, with the EU, I mean, do you think the US will ever follow, or are they just going to let California and Europe legislate, and because we're so broken?
All right. So, well, let me say this. You guys will remember a few years ago, there was the whole sort of controversy over sponsored content.
Right.
There was a guy named, I hate to call his name out, but I'm going to, Ted Murphy. He created a site called Pay Per Post. If you remember that, you could go and you could write nice articles, blog posts
known
about
as Isaiah, right?
Isaiah now. You could write articles about brands and products and things and get paid for it, or recompensed in some way, reimbursed, I don't know, whatever, and never disclose the fact, excuse me, that you were doing that. So what happened? The FTC weighed in and said, sorry, guys, you have to disclose those relationships. I think this is another sort of version or iteration of that same sort of thing. So yes, in some respect, I think there's going to be some kind of AI specific laws or regulations that will take place because it has to, because we are not going to be as proactive as we need to be.
I think there might be, and this kind of, plays to your idea of the tipping point potentially being the summation of several things coming together, right? Is, there's the idea of regulation, and we already have, the Federal Trade Commission and I believe Federal Communications Commission as well have already issued guidance and warnings even around, the extent to which even technology companies can claim their systems use AI, because even that in this kind of, is a whole, another ethical dilemma in a way, is all of these companies who are claiming their systems use AI when in fact they don't, right? I'm not talking about the open AIs or the Microsofts or the Googles now, but there are plenty of software companies who all of a sudden found themselves in a position, right, where they had to say they had generative AI features baked into their software, and in reality they didn't, right? So that's a whole misleading marketing thing and whatever. But, so already we have, let's say, Federal Trade Commission issuing guidance. Let's say we've got the regulatory thing, you've got the sort of the crisis or incident based activity like you're talking about. I know another example was it several months back where Rite Aid is now prohibited from using facial recognition technology because they were using it in their store without proper disclosures, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of stuff is serious, right? For the government to step in and say, you as a corporation cannot make use of a technology your competitors may for years because you used it irresponsibly, right? We might see that kind of thing start to happen.
Where people basically get legislated and
there's a lot
ruled
of these
back into it.
And none of these are small things. In many cases, they're even big things, right? But when they come together, they might actually, I think, force the conversation for a lot of brands. But I'm even thinking about, to me, in many ways, one of the most fundamental things, even if you're the Jeff Livingston of your marketing organization and you're like, look, this isn't really that important, is it? I'm a lazy marketer. I'm going to do what I've got to do. I've got a job to get done.
That seat.
Right?
But
if you legitimately believe this is not a marketer's conversation to have, or you're legitimate, I know Jeff has come a long way on this.
Oh, yeah, that's not what it is. But the reality is that most marketers won't. I mean, I think to have that, to even be delusional about that is crazy. I'm sorry, guys, but I think you guys are way off. No, but let me finish my point.
I didn't even get to finish my question.
My point is specific here. Like, businesses act and then they get reined in, which is the problem. That is the way this government works. This is the way our society works. This is American capitalism. We're never going to face the piper until the piper becomes so odious that we all get dragged down into it. And even then, that doesn't stop us, a la social media.
Right. So what I was going to say was you were correct. You're 100% correct. But what about the simple argument that every marketer I know cares about is brand safety? Right? If there's one argument that a brand marketer cares about, it's I'm doing damage to my brand, and that damage is going to not just philosophically hurt my brand, but it's going to tank my sales.
I disagree, man. I don't think a lot of marketers even think about that. I think a lot of the spam and pray.
Maybe.
Well, I think the answer ultimately, and both of you are hitting on the point, is when it hurts too darn much not to do it, people will do it, whether that's reputational damage, regulatory penalties, loss of consumer trust or customer trust, or even lawsuits perhaps. When it becomes too big a problem to ignore, it's going to force brands to take steps, whether they see it as necessary or not, or they want to. When it hurts, look, and it's not just AI ethics, right? Most of us are that way, aren't we? When when the faucet is leaking more than it should, then we're going to finally get around to fixing it. But as long as it's a slow drip, then we're okay with that.
So as we don't talk
when
about
the water
furnaces.
starts beginning to pour out, then we're not okay with it, right? So I think that's ultimately it. We're going to be pressured into it by various and sundry forces.
Well, I'm curious to throw a little bit of a curve into this, which is OpenAI. And I feel like OpenAI kind of leads this kind of crazy charge down like barbarians running down the hill, right? And I feel like that the industry is following them, for better or for worse. Isn't this a youthful mistake since we're the old CompuServe crowd here? I mean, what we're talking about is we're all senior, and regardless of positioning, we all understand the value of making sure our I's are dotted or T's are crossed, that we're following, that we're not engaging in bias, that kind of thing. But isn't this kind of a huge industry failure that's being led by the industry leader, or the current leader, I should say? And even Google makes this mistake.
Yeah, look at what happened with Gemini. I mean, the other day.
Yeah.
The German soldier.
So what are the tech companies? What's their role in it? I mean, I think, Greg, you had a question about pre-baking in bias, but maybe even we should look at that. It's not just bias, but pre-baking in a complete lack of ethics, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would not look at OpenAI or ChatGPT as the ethical poster child of all of these LLMs. Excuse me again. I mean, when it comes down to it, just the tools that I use almost daily, which involves ChatGPT. I think if you're looking at more ethical LLMs, you're looking at things like Claude with its constitutional AI. Also, I think lately, if you know Kate Chernis, you guys know her maybe. She's very focused on an ethical use, as well as Maya Habib with Writer. Those to me are LLMs that represent, and companies that represent, a more ethical approach in terms specifically of the kind of data they're being trained on. But when it comes down to responsibility, everybody shares it, in my opinion. The developers certainly have a responsibility. Marketers have responsibility for ethical use. The brands that they represent, or the organizations they're part of, certainly have a responsibility. It's across the board, right? We all have to kind of focus on this. For some reason, I think about 5 blind guys and the elephant. We're all touching the elephant at different points, but we all still got to touch the elephant to try to understand the importance of it, whatever, if that makes any sense. Maybe that doesn't.
Kind of building on this, do you feel like marketers are willfully, or maybe just because they're not up to speed and educated enough about this, turning a blind eye? Like, I'm thinking about the typical marketing department. The CMO might be getting a lot of pressure from the C-suite, from the board, whomever, to make sense of this generative AI thing and to start doing something with it. We can't fall behind the competition. We've got to make some moves. And if you obviously, as we're discussing here, spend enough time paying attention to the artificial intelligence space, you kind of get the sense nobody's got our back, right? Sam Altman is not going to tell you what's in his model. He's not going to back off from using, other people's intellectual property, copyrighted material to train that model. They're not doing a whole lot, as far as I can see, to really identify, manage, and control bias in the model. There's all other stuff that's obviously well beyond that, in terms of the energy use, the likelihood, or I think certainty that they used, underpaid labor in developing countries to do a lot of really ugly work in terms of weeding out things like child pornography and bestiality and all this stuff out of the training data set, right? There's all this stuff that's happening behind the firewall that is just, there's no transparency whatsoever. And we know it's happening, But if I'm
Right.
sitting in the CMO's chair facing pressure to do something with AI so that I can make my press release, get a Clio, maybe potentially engage my customers better in the best of all worlds, do I just turn a blind eye to that and say, not my problem? I didn't build it. I'm just using it. And why is that a mistake?
Oh boy. I think about how about the social network saying, oh, we just supply the capabilities to use it. We're not responsible for how it's used, right? Is that not kind of the same sort of
Right.
argument in a sense?
It's the classic NRA defense,
Right.
right?
I mean, NRA certainly, right, that guns don't kill people, but I feel like there's, this is a conversation marketers seem to have every several years, every hype cycle almost, right?
Right. Right.
Like, and we kind of turn a blind
It's okay
eye
to
to
spam
it,
people.
right? Right? It's
Sure.
like,
I mean, yeah.
today we know the harms that social media is at least partially responsible for causing. But
Mhm.
20 years ago, we were all in on social media, and
Right.
it didn't matter. And maybe we weren't aware that we could potentially be causing these harms. But even today, now that we're aware of the harms, it doesn't stop brands from going all in on social media. Right?
Right.
Here we are with AI. Right?
Well, I mean, it's everything. Marketers, we just screw stuff up because look, years ago in blogging,
Now we're down to it. Now you're talking my language.
when blogging first kind of came around as a business use case, I remember, who was it? Dave Weiner. I forget who said blogging is the last form of honest advertising, and then marketers jumped
Food
in
Train
the fray.
Manifesto. Here we are.
Yeah, it screwed it all up. And then how about email? Come on, when we think about email, okay, there's a canned spam act, which should be the can't spam, but don't we go purchase, mailing lists and email addresses, and then we hit cold emails over and over and over again? I mean, we're spamming people without, they didn't ask. Now, the laws don't prohibit us from doing that. As long as
nobody engages with them anymore because
nobody
everybody's
engages
so
with it anymore. I mean, you get 1% maybe. I mean, these
and we
things.
celebrate it. I got 1%.
Yeah.
That's right. Well,
Like I've
okay, and
always
then
said-
social media. Let me give you my. All right.
What about
Let me
the
give
other
you my
99 you pissed off, man?
Right, well, that's the thing, right?
Let me give you my thing on social media. Hang with me, guys. All right.
All right, Elon, go.
I'm not. No. Now, if you look over my shoulder, one of my shoulders here, I don't know which one. I always point in the wrong direction. There are 4 books that I've written or co-authored dealing with blogging, social media, social commerce. So I'm a big believer in it. I'm such a big believer in social media. When it really came sort of around on the scene for business again, I'm going to date it as 2006. Maybe that's just when I saw the light, as it were. I felt this about social media. I felt it was a way for us to connect with people transparently and authentically. Now, those words are considered trite nowadays, but those words were pillars to me of what this method of engagement could be. And there was an old song written back in the 80s. I'm going to just give you the chorus. It says this: you can show me your sales curve, plot my life on your flow chart, but there's just some things that numbers can't measure, matters of the heart.
That's right.
And I felt deeply, genuinely, that social media was a matter of the heart method of communication. And darned if marketers didn't get in there and figure out all the ways they could screw it up. Well, okay, so let's do that with AI now.
Well,
And
actually, I would argue
say
that AI screwed up social networking.
Well, maybe so. Again, I think the responsibility, is on both sides of the scale. But maybe all of that, my Puritan growing up or whatever has said to me, no, let's do this the right way. Let's do this in a way that people can trust us. Let's do this in a way that we can have integrity. Again, transparency. What did I say? Fairness, transparency, accountability in this case, but authenticity too, right? But it just comes back to who we are as individuals, I think, or perhaps as companies or brands,
It's interesting because like we were talking about this privately quite a bit, Greg and I, over the past few weeks, and this isn't a social networking podcast, right? It's an AI podcast generally, or
Right.
technology adoption. So I could see where we can make that move, but there's just definitely a sense of betrayal over the promise of what we trusted these platforms to provide us, which was we're going to build our following, we're going to communicate with people, we're going to invest the time to reply back, we're going to engage, we're going to be transparent, we're going to bring valuable conversations, we're going to honor other voices. And all that's been completely diminished by these streams and the algorithms, which are basically all geared towards generating revenue. I mean, like how many times have we seen posts literally start going and then get throttled and then you get a boost message? And, to me, the monetization, which is fair, right? Like this is a business, but I swear every time this conversation comes up now, you can always change your settings and get more of a stream. How about I pay you $20 a month so I could just see the people that I follow and not hear all your algorithmic crap? Right. You know what I mean? Because that's who I'm here for, is the people I'm following, not your ads.
Right.
And we can't turn off social networking without literally leaving it.
Right. Well,
betrayed.
Maybe on that note, hold on one second, Paul. Maybe on that note, since we're about half an hour in, why don't we take a quick break? I feel like ironically, in a sense, to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back in a few moments to continue the conversation.
All right, everybody, we're back after a rather testy rant about social media. Let's get back to AI ethics. Sorry about that, y'all. Can't help myself. I get so passionate. But Paul, maybe a good way to get back into this is to ask you what's right about AI ethics. Like, how do we know when we're doing the right thing as marketers?
Yeah, that is a tough question. Or how do people put it? Oh, that's an excellent question, which means I have no idea how to answer that. But no, I think there's a way to determine what's right. Based on certain criteria, one of which is what you might think of as universal principles. And guess what? 3 words I'm going to go back to. It's sort of like same song, different verse: fairness, transparency, accountability, but also things like respect for privacy, non-discrimination, human rights standards. Can you say those are absolutely universal? I think they are largely universal. But I think you have to start somewhere, and those seem like good words to start with, to provide a foundation for ethical decision-making that really transcends certain context when it comes to the use of AI. I think that's one step you take, determining where the foundation is for us. I think you got to talk to people too. Talk to your customers. Talk to industry experts. Talk to ethicists. Talk to attorneys. Talk to social anthropologists or whatever. Talk to marketing people. Have a group discussion about what this stuff looks like, and see if you can't surface certain principles or perspectives that would seem to be a fit for you. Also identifying blind spots. Where are we missing it? Whatever. But I think it's a matter of coming into some consensus. So laying a foundation, having some conversations with people from various disciplines and backgrounds to form a consensus. But if you're representing a company, then obviously your company has certain values. You got a mission statement, right? You probably have core values. Does not this need to align with that as well? I think that's what helps make it authentic and coherent, and it makes it feel right for you, At the same time, you do have to be contextually sensitive. And while you're looking for consistency, there are going to be variations. And maybe if we talk about, global brands, I mean, the big brands, how does it differ for them, or does it at all differ for them? I think there is something to consider where that's the case. If I'm a small to medium business in the United States, that's one thing. But if I span 20 countries, that's a whole other, ball of wax, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think you've hit on 2 important and interesting things, right? One is the idea that your ethical standards for artificial intelligence maybe almost necessarily have to ladder up to not just universal truths, but your company's own sense of purpose and your values. And I'm not going to, lie here. I've worked with many organizations who either have not clearly established a mission, a vision, a purpose, a set of corporate values, especially younger, faster moving organizations. I've worked with some companies who have been in business for 5 years and then have come to me and said, can you help us write our mission statement? Which is bizarre, but certainly if you're Coca-Cola, if you're Campbell Soup, if you're IBM, you've got that stuff. It's on the walls in your headquarters office. It may or may not have teeth. You may or may not live by them, but certainly that gives you some kind of a North Star, right? Absolutely. If it's something that clearly goes against your business's core values, then it probably goes against your artificial intelligence values as well. I think that's an important insight. The second thing that I really liked that you said was around this idea of bringing in diverse voices. We have this tendency, I think, as corporate executives to live within, I guess, so to speak, the ivory tower, right? Where we talk about the importance of diversity and equity, inclusion, and weeding bias out of algorithms and all this stuff. And that conversation happens in a conference room with a bunch of people that look a lot like us, who are inside the company, have drunk the company Kool-Aid.
Are they all bald?
They are, in fact, yes. Right? And we don't think in terms of how do we bring in, a multi-generational point of view? How do we bring in multi-ethnic point of view? How do we get multicultural and multi not the right word, it's not multi, but like this diverse sense of perspectives from people who don't live inside the organization, the social anthropologists, the sociologists, the philosophers. I think that kind of stuff is critical for organizations to think about. Like a lot of times when we talk to a client about building in like an AI council, whether it's an AI ethics council or an AI strategy council, like one of the first pieces of advice is you need some outside voices because you can't do this alone. And you're going to have way too many blind spots. But that seems to be something a lot of organizations will resist. But it is absolutely, I think, sound advice.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because we have, maybe tunnel vision or we have a certain perspective, and, it's wise to have, differing perspectives and different, folks looking at it from a different lens, perhaps, I guess you could say. But ultimately, it does come down to aligning with your company values too. I mean, it has to. But one other thing is this: as you were talking, how about this? Not AI ethics, but ethics, acting ethically. And then how do we plug AI into that so that it's commensurate with that? That it doesn't conflict with that. It's not. We go to AI ethics or look to AI for ethics. We've already got the ethics foundation built. How do we make AI fit into that in a way that's is synonymous or in keeping with what we believe and how we should act as a company organization?
So it's
maybe
just
that's another way to look at it.
Is it a larger values issue, a lack thereof? Do you think in some cases where people just don't have it? I mean, I think this is always the war of society, right? Like what's right, what's wrong. Are we there at a point now where we're just so corroded that we just can't address this in a manner?
Well, I mean, you use the word morals or something like that, which I think invariably has to factor in, but whose morals are we adhering to? Is right situational? Is it subject to cultural norms, or are there absolutes? I think those are questions, or that is a question that has to be wrestled with, and that's why you need those differing voices to take a look at that.
Right.
But,
I mean, it's interesting because when you think about ethics in its raw form, not even just business ethics, but ethics as a discipline of philosophy, in a lot of ways, there is no absolute right or wrong, right? It is essentially a debate about how can we, kind of be the best humans we can be. And not everybody has the same perspective, right? You put two philosophers in a room and they would, get into a sort of cage match, kind of to the
Plato
death
and
around what is right, what is wrong, and never come out with a hard, firm answer.
Right.
And that's, I think, a lot of the complexity with this. And then you tack on business, and the purpose of the business is not necessarily to do what's right for people. It's to make money for shareholders.
Right.
And how do you balance those two things? And can one support the other and vice versa, right?
Exactly.
It's a very complicated thing. Maybe here's something a little bit less complicated. Maybe not, right? So clearly one of the, I think, prevailing conversations around generative AI in particular has been the extent to which it might result in job loss. And there are a lot of views, right, ranging from this is going to be catastrophic, millions of people out of work, down to, we'll adapt, kind of somewhere in the middle. Yes, you might lose some jobs may go away, new jobs will come, in the wake, all the way down to this stuff is not nearly good enough. It's humans in charge, humans in the loop, retain autonomy and authority, and we're just going to control the tools, right? There's a lot of different perspectives. But clearly, to a money-minded CEO, part of the value of artificial intelligence like Gen AI is, can I reduce my workforce and thereby be more profitable by deploying these tools?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That seems like a relatively simple argument, but there is, of course, an ethical underpinning in the fact that,
there is.
by definition, this is not good for certain people, right?
Right. Well, you look at, I will tell you, some of the work that I do is within the sort of what they call the BPO, business process outsourcing space. And I actually worked for a company that was doing that. I was their digital marketing guy for a couple of years. And I see that, industry, customer service, you think about call centers, stuff like that, being really impacted by this, because now you're seeing companies come out with AI agents, right? There's one company, I won't name them, but I was listening to a recording and I thought it was a person. No, it was AI talking, and it was amazing. And
unlike
eventually
our intro.
you might get, huh?
Unlike our intro.
I'm sorry. Well, anyway, I thought you
Paul's
said
like,
something.
what's he talking about?
So you are dealing with AI at the front level. Maybe you get kicked up to an agent. But here's where I think the ethical question is, and I think this is definitely situational. What are the benefits of the business versus the human cost, right? Obviously, there may be a cost benefit where using AI is concerned, and I know maybe you're not going to mention it, but the Klarna question, getting rid of 700 people in favor of using AI. Well, Klarna's not going to be the only one doing that, and I'm sure they're not.
Nope.
But if you're going to do that, make sure you do it for the right reasons, and it's not just a short-term cost cutting. We have I think it's a Southern expression. It may not. I live in the South, obviously. Maybe it's not just a Southern expression. We say, cut off your nose to spite your face. Make sure you're not just cutting off your nose to spite your face. Make sure there's real, sound value in doing this. But I think if you're going to do it, be fully transparent about why you're doing it, what's happening, and why. And if there's any way that you can help people, reskilling them, retraining them, providing, if you got to let them go, give them some runway so that they can perhaps, find another job without, being in the bread line or whatever, and make it a sort of a last resort, if at all possible. But invariably, it's coming. I used to believe that there was this sort of idea: you won't lose your job to AI, but you will lose your job to someone who knows how to use AI.
That's right.
I don't know that that's any longer valid. I think you need to know how to use AI. But that's not necessarily going to guarantee that you're going to be able to keep your job. So it's a real consideration, and it absolutely has ethical implications.
Yeah, I think Google's a good example of that with all the advertising. layoffs that they have with algorithms, literally just being able to better source content, better source decision making on Google ad spends. And it's unfortunate for those folks that were in those jobs. But I know in DC that most of the layoffs in the office that occurred last year, towards the end of the year, were those people, specifically those ad reps.
Right. That's the funky thing, right? Is that we can say all we want, this whole thing about you're not going to lose your job to AI, ... And I've used a phrase like that many, many times in my career for everything from social media to digital to, to artificial intelligence. And to an extent, it rings true. But when there's a technology that can just fully automate a given process, like ad sales or ad targeting, and that is fundamentally what you do for a living, that doesn't give you a whole lot of runway to upskill, reskill, right? So you have that sort of gap in time between the time you're told we have automated your entire function and the time at which you can say, okay, well, here's where I'm going to take my career next. And I think it's going to be tricky for a lot of people.
I think, oh, absolutely. And isn't that true in any sort of cycle? There is
absolutely. The only thing that's different now is perhaps the speed with which the cycle is moving, right? When as we went from an agrarian society or an agricultural society to an industrial society, we didn't lose all of our farmland overnight, right? We still haven't lost. Obviously, there still are plenty of farmers in the farming industry, right? But people had time to adjust to that, to learn a skill, and the speed at which AI is changing means every time you learn a skill that uses AI, you need to now learn the next skill because AI can take on the skill you just learned, right? A year ago, everyone had to be a prompt engineer, and now you're starting to hear what Jeff and I have been saying all along, that there's not much need for prompt engineering. In fact, AIs themselves are better at prompting themselves than people are at prompting.
Don't get me ranting again. I'm going to rant again.
A whole other rant. Which I guess we're coming up on an hour. Maybe one question, if we're thinking about the future, real quick, so let's say it's 2030, or whatever, pick an arbitrary date. I don't care what it is, but some number of years into the future. What do you think and what do you hope this conversation would sound like then as opposed to now? What are marketers thinking and doing about ethics at that point in time?
Well, I hope it happens before 2030. Is 2025 too soon? I don't know. Well, by 2030, I hope the AI Marketing Ethics Digest newsletter is still around. But no, seriously.
Written by
subscribe today.
Anyway, I said I wasn't going to pimp it, and I just did. I'm not being ethical. We'll pimp
it for you. Subscribe
I'm not being ethical. I'm so sorry. I would like to think that the ethical use of AI in any respect, and specifically in marketing, is just the norm, right? It's guided by some strong industry standards that prioritize fairness, transparency, respect for consumer rights, accountability. All of that's just baked in. It is the way that it is. I would like to see, companies harness AI's power to enhance customer experiences, being fully accountable for their practices. I would also like to see them see AI as what it is, and what I like to think of it is a tool that augments human creativity and judgment without compromising privacy or doing harm or perpetuating bias and all those nasty things that we seem to be talking about nowadays. And I would like for sort of the level set in everybody's mind to be AI ethics is human ethics, is marketing ethics. It's all one and the same. It's all ethics. And AI, marketing, all of it revolves around that core, I guess you could say.
Oh, the world would be a better place for that. There's all those wishes. I think that it would be a really awesome thing if it happened.
Yep. And I think there's some we don't perhaps have time to talk about it today, but there's some concrete things that brands and marketers and companies can begin to do to make this a reality. So it's not just all sort of pie in the sky in theory.
there's some actionable steps that people can take. So,
well, folks, if you don't know Paul, we encourage you to follow him online. And Paul, where can they find you on Substack, which is the home of the newsletter?
Well, the easiest way is AI marketing. Wait a minute. AImarketingethics.com, which simply points to the newsletter, redirects, but that's easier than remembering the longer. But AImarketingethics.com will kick you over to the newsletter, and it's on Substack. If you are on Substack, you can find me that way. But and of course on LinkedIn is where I hang my hat very often as well.
Sure. Very good. Very good. Folks, if you like the podcast today, please give us a like. If you hated the podcast today, go away. Just kidding. Please send us an email and let us know, or DM us. We definitely appreciate feedback. We welcome it. Tell your friends about the pod, subscribe, the whole 9 yards. We do appreciate it. And reviews are very, very helpful. Please leave one today. With that, Greg, I'm going to pass the mic to you to take us on out.
All right. Wow.
You have to say goodbye. Be nice.
All right. I'll say goodbye then. It's been great having you, Paul. Thank you very much. I hope this has been a valuable conversation for everybody. We got a little bit testy. We debated. We got philosophical. But at the end of the day, AI ethics is real. It is a real and important part of the way marketers in general need to be thinking about the way these technologies and tools come into our profession, our practice, our lives, and what we do with them ultimately at the end of the day matters. So right. Thank you very much, Paul. It's been a great conversation. Thank you as always, Jeffrey. And we will see everybody next time around. Thank you.